How is this still going on? This verse been going for way too long. If you're blind, you can see that this is wrong. And I won't comply. Not me, no way. I may be.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Gender and hiding transition from parents. That's the instruction from all levels of the Canadian government and Toronto District School Board. I'm going to show you that in a write-up that's looking at what's going on in our education. And I'm going to try and paint a picture for you of just of things that have happened in the last couple of days. And I am opposed to these things happening in education. I don't want them to happen. I think that they harm children. And these are generalities, obviously, but what's going on is not helping people, and it's not affirming people or anything to that effect, despite the rhetoric they use. And it's very interesting to see the on-the-ground impact in schools, because we are seeing that because people have cameras on them 24/7 and they're taking pictures of this insanity. And apparently there's not a lot that anybody can do about it at this point in time. And I think that that's strange, because I made I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I said, if a female teacher left in June and then got breast implants, like obnoxiously large breast implants, and with permanently erect nipples, and came back to school and was wearing shirts or whatever that highlighted this physical change, I'm sure there would be conversations. I'm sure there would be something done by management or the unions or something to that effect. I'm sure of it, because I worked in that field. I worked in children's mental health and in schools. And I know the conversations that were happening in 2001 to 2015. And something like that would get people talking, even if it was tasteful, let's say. So it's very, very interesting what's going on now. It's not that long ago that we had sanity in schools. I worked in schools when things were mostly sane. I left when things got out of control. And then the out of control just went everywhere. It was like Pandora's box got open. Released ISIS human trafficker. Where are they now? And that's with, Raquel Dancho. I nailed it. And she's asking, we heard that this person was released and resettled in Canada. Where? Can we have information about that? The answer will be no. Gerald Butts is responding to the massive viral meme of I am a Canadian. I contributed to the country in this way. And Justin Trudeau thinks that I'm an extremist because I'm not taking his medication that he says that we all need. Very interesting. The left at this point in time are trying to claim that somebody is paying for this campaign. This is one of the most grassroots campaigns I've ever seen in Canadian history. My Twitter feed is almost useless because of this meme. This meme is so big. In a scroll, I would say the meme is 7 out of 10 tweets. And you have to scroll and scroll and scroll to find news. So apologies if we're a little thin today. We're a bit of a short show today, but it's still fine. Don't worry about it. But it is wild to see how many people this meme has resonated with. And I think it was Marty. I think I accidentally showed you the first person who did this, but I think it was Marty who did it. But everybody's doing it now. I'm going to show you Danielle Smith and RCMP. All sorts of people are participating in this meme. And Gerald Butts says, who's paying for this? Unbelievable, right? They don't want to give any credibility to anybody saying that what they're doing is wrong. What they're doing is not resonating with people. They want to believe, or they want to project that everybody in Canada is on board, and if you're not on board, you're actually an alt-right. Fill in the blanks, because I'm sick and tired of saying it. It's ridiculous, and it's a smear, and it's a lie. Okay, Bank of Canada is set to lose money because of quantitative easing. Yeah, quantitative easing. Well, I mean, the whole practice of quantitative easing is actually laid out pretty simply in this article, so I'm going to read it. And when you read it, you realize how terrible an idea it is. But we do it anyway because reasons. And don't worry, it won't drive inflation. And inflation's transitory. And inflation will be temporary. And don't worry, inflation's good for you. Where you are here. Okay, let's get started because there's a medium amount to get to. First, if you want to support the show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. You can check out the forums. They're free. You can do a one-time payment or a monthly subscription. You can check out my book if you're interested in that, or the merch if you're interested in that. You can sign up for Kitchen Table Talks. They're happening tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. 1 o'clock. If you're interested in that, I'll send out an email, but I'm terribly forgetful, and I haven't sent out an email in a while, so I'll send it out today. And you can click here. Probably today. If I forget, I'll talk about it tomorrow. And you can click here if you want to support the show without sending me money directly, but you shop on Amazon and you want to support the show that way. You can check locals if you want to support the show that way. Check out Canada Report if you want to see the links that show up in a flurry between 5 and 7 a.m. Okay, here's Jonathan Kay. Let's talk about gender in schools and how this is all coalescing in Canada right now. He says this week, Governor Canada Health sent around the new inclusive language guide, an invaluable resource for avoiding cis heteronormative terminology. I'm not going to go through this. Jonathan Kay is going through this, but they're trying to hijack language in a way that seems inclusive. It seems like what they're trying to do is a net positive, a net gain. But what they're doing is just redefining words on the fly to align with a narrative and an ideology that everybody doesn't agree with, right? And it doesn't matter. Getting shoved down everybody's throats. People have pronouns and profiles and all sorts of stuff, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. While they're using, this is a bad example from Jonathan Kay, but it's still a perversion of and forced change of language that is being controlled by people who are pushing a narrative and not society, I would say. Usually when a language is changed, it's a society that makes the agreement that that's going to happen. But in this case, it's being absolutely forced from every angle. And it's ridiculous. People wouldn't do this. People are resisting it. And because they're resisting it, they're being called names. And that's the first step. Okay, there's going to be more steps. You have to comply, or now you're going to be fined if you don't have pronouns in your profile, or you're going to be put in jail if you don't have pronouns in your profile, right? They're going to amp it up until they get people to comply, and then it becomes culture. You think that this can't happen, but there was a Chinese example of the short Sean hair and the back, like the hair just at the back of the head. I can't remember the name of it, but there was a whole... I went through a thread talking about how when a new emperor, Chinese emperor came in, one of the very important cultural things was to have long hair in China at that time. And then this new emperor came in, and the people his family belonged to had short Sean hair, like bald in the front and top, and then long in the back. And so the edict was everybody has to cut their hair like this. And so even though all of these people, a lot of people, the majority of people did not subscribe to doing this, they didn't want to, and it was important culturally to maintain the long hair, they did it anyway because they were forced to. So you think that you could stop it, and I'm telling you, I think you're wrong. They're doing this by force. It's happening. And the only way force is stopped is not by votes. I'm sorry. And I'm not advocating violence, that's not it, but I'm just saying they're doing this. They're pushing. This is forceful. They are using force. And you can't stop them by saying, no, don't, because they're just going to drive by you in the tank. Okay? Here is what's happening in school boards. This is Just Dad. He's a lawyer, retired in Ontario, as far as I understand it. And he's got a Substack, and he says, can't ask, don't tell. Schools are hiding gender transition from parents. One of the most frightening things that can happen to the parents of a gender questioning child is learning that the school has agreed to change a child's name and pronouns without telling them. In fact, other students in the school may be explicitly instructed not to share this information with the child's parents. What is happening? The practice of supporting gender transitions of a child without consulting the parents has been endorsed by all three levels of government of Canada. In a booklet by the Public Health Agency of Canada on gender identity in schools, linked here, states, quote, families are not always a safe place for gender variant youth. It is important not to involve the parents, caregivers of gender variant youth unless the youth themselves have already disclosed their identity to their families, or you have a legal duty to report such as in the case of a risk of self-harm. There's always an inherent risk of self-harm during they claim that if you don't let a child self-harm, if you don't let a child transition, they will commit suicide. That is the bedrock of their claim that transition is necessary, which is unbelievable, but that's basically what it is. So here they're saying in this case, there's a duty to report, which if you work in a school, you know you have a duty to report if there's abuse going on or anything to that effect. So blah, 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 blah. If you work with kids, you're briefed about all of that. And so it's interesting that they're putting this as a, maybe, right, in the literature. And that's their own gender identity in schools. That's their own literature. So they're contradicting their own ideology. But that's nothing new. They always do that. Generally, these things are contradictory. Back to the article. Some perspective is important. Teachers and other adults do not have to repeat everything a child tells them. Children have the right to privacy of their own thoughts. When they share a private thought or feeling in confidence with a trusted adult, that confidence should be respected, even against parents. Yeah, I agree with this to a point. If a child confides in a teacher and that confidence is of not a super importance that the parents don't need to know about, say it's a school related matter or something like that, then the teacher can have their ability to make a call on that. The teacher doesn't have to call the parents every time the student expresses an opinion on something. That's insane. But we're not talking about that, right? Back to this. It's also true that home is sometimes not a safe place. Absolutely. I've worked with kids who home is not a safe place. I worked with and advocated for kids whose home was not a safe place for many, many years, decades. Back to this. If teachers genuinely believe, and so like, that is true. Back to the homes thing. Sorry. It is true that homes can sometimes not be a safe place, but that doesn't mean the parents have abdicated their right to parenting. If that happens, it's not the school's place to do that. It's Family and Children's Services and police and a court system, which has been massaged, has been perverted in ways through the years. But I have a deep understanding of this. I have a very deep, long history with involvement with Family and Children's Services and working with them professionally and in personal life, etc. And people say things they don't understand. And this gentleman's, I think, articulating it quite well. But even if a parent does a bad job or does something that you disagree with, or even society disagrees with, you don't have a right to ride in and remove that parent from that child's life. You don't have the right. That parent has the right to parent their child. And if they're bad at it, that's terrible for the kid. But they should get help to become better together, not remove the child and remove the parent. That's not how you solve that problem. You help them to become a cohesive, functional unit together, not remove that evil parent because he's evil and we'll save this child by indoctrinating them into our narrative. That's not how this should work. And that's the second is what they're trying to do. The first is how I worked, how mental health used to work. It used to recognize that families are imperfect. People make mistakes. People were raised by people who made mistakes, right? And bad habits are hard to break and require a long and difficult process to help people get through them, but you still have to live during that process. And you can't say this person's bad because X, Y, Z. It doesn't work like that. Kids don't work like that. Families don't work like that. They don't work like that. Even if home's not a safe place, you can't just remove them. It doesn't work like that. Back to this. If teachers genuinely believe that a student is at risk of abuse at home, they should be reporting it so they can be investigated by properly trained child welfare workers. Yes, that's what I just said. However, there is a line between a child's private thoughts and public conduct. Schools cross that line when they take active steps to affirm a child's gender identity. It's one thing for a teacher not to repeat something a child says. It's another to take steps which involve the whole school and deliberately refrain from telling a child's parents. The Toronto District School Board's policy states there is no age limit on making an accommodation request, and young students have the same right to privacy and to have accommodations made on their behalf with or without their guardian's knowledge. A school should never disclose a student's gender nonconformity or transgender status to the student's parents, guardians, caregivers without the student's explicit prior consent. This is true regardless of the age of the student. While this seems to say What this seems to say is that a student of any age can request accommodation, which might include the use of a different name and pronouns or access to use the washrooms of the opposite sex without notifying their parents or guardians. This policy is typical of school division policies throughout Ontario and in other parts of Canada. A teacher in California is going further and has set up a transition closet, which allows children to change into clothes that fit who they truly are when they get to school and change back before going home. Why it's wrong? This is wrong on many levels. It ignores basic principles of child development, which have found that children's identity is in a state of flux and that children require adult guidance. It also defies basic principles of domestic and international law, which recognize that the family is the primary source of guidance and support for children. Social transitioning during childhood and adolescence is a medical intervention which can have irreversible side effects. Studies have consistently found that children who are socially transitioned are more likely to persist in their gender dysphoria and proceed to medical transition with lifelong consequences, while children who are not transitioned are likely to desist. Policies such as the Endocrine Society guidelines explicitly recommend against social transition without the involvement of a mental health professional. Gender dysphoria is often associated with mental health conditions, including depression, autism spectrum conditions, eating disorders, and borderline personality disorders. Teachers and school counselors do not have the training to diagnose these conditions and seldom know a child's full medical history. School policies will not allow a teacher to give a child so much as a non-prescription painkiller without permission in writing from the parents. A change of name and pronouns can have an impact on a child's developing mind, which is as profound and permanent as any drug. When a school excludes parents from critical decisions affecting a child's future, they violate the principle recognized in both Canada and international law that children have a right to be raised by their parents. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child states, and then it goes through it. This is a longer article than this, but I think it's made its point, and I think I've made mine. The school boards are trying with law and legalese to undermine the parent's place in the life of a child. That's happening much faster than you think. Much, much faster than you think. Here's Chanel Fall. I interviewed Chanel. It was a wonderful talk. And she says, red flags according to the Waterloo Regional District School Board candidate Jane Herring. Red flags according to her. Embracing diversity of opinion. Okay. All voices are needed. Oh, all voices are needed. That's not all voices are needed. Give parents, students, and staff their voices back. That's a red flag. Board has weaponized the rules. It sounds like the board has weaponized the rules. Yeah. Redirect the focus to academic excellence. How dare we talk about academic excellence of all students? Oh my gosh, that's a racist dog whistle. I think the hashtag Black Excellence would be the racist dog whistle, and me saying everybody should be treated at their needs and based on who they are and not based on their skin color. That's the opposite of racism. However, I'm being called racist, and it's insane. It's absolutely wild. It's so funny. It's funny because there's no other word for it. I mean, I'm sure it's slanderous and probably illegal too. Any lawyers want to write a letter for me? But other than that, it's pretty hilarious, I think. Anyway, regardless. Honor the rights of all parents. That's a red flag. Put an end to identity politics. Oh my gosh, red flag, red flag, red flag. This is Jane Herring, and she's a trustee candidate, and she's a current trustee. And this is what current trustees think of education. They hate anybody who wants to think for themselves or allow the parents to parent the child. What an absolute travesty. What a disaster. David Haskell, he's a professor, I believe, at the University of Waterloo. And he says a Waterloo Regional District School Board teacher has publicly and viciously slandered certain trustee candidates. Why the lies? She fears these candidates will expose and end the radical indoctrination she and her colleagues have been pushing. Share this story and vote for anyone she's slandered. Yeah, Waterloo's vicious. Guelph's pretty wild. Guelph's wild, man. I can't even believe it. It's just incredible. And I knew because of course it's going to be like this. But Ottawa's, the news articles, the highlighting of Dr. Neely, all of that crazy stuff is happening in Ottawa. And I thought probably it'll be very minor in Guelph, because in Guelph, nobody really cares about the school board. The NDP, I heard that the NDP used the school board as their breeding ground for council, and council's trying to get NDP into the federal. And I mean, you've got Lloyd Logfield at this point in time in Guelph, so that's basically NDP. Oh my goodness. Anyway, regardless, the NDP and the powers that be in Guelph social circles are doing exactly the same thing that the Waterloo Regional people are doing. They're accusing trustee candidates who they disagree with ideologically of being racist, but then they don't engage with any debate or discussion about it. It's childish, and it's unbelievable. And it's wild, right? So anyway, if you're interested in that, check that out. Trustee Mark P. That's my Twitter handle. Have a look. Here is more news on the Oakville teacher. Woman says this is autogynephilia. Students are being made unwilling participants. Students need protection. I would pull my kid. I would pull my kid, and I would have a problem about this massively. Also, here's a picture from the classroom. Tim Poole of Timcast has very eagle eyes. He says, what's that blue thing on the left side of the picture? I said, this kid? No, not the kid. The pedophile swirl there. In the classroom, right? Waterloo Regional District School Board. Isn't that interesting, right? What an incredible, I can't even believe. I don't know that I would be able to go into this classroom. I certainly don't think that kids should be subject to this. This is grotesque is one word that comes to mind. I would say this is abusive to these kids. I'm interested if there's any lawyers who would be interested in a class action lawsuit against the school board for subjecting these kids to that. Because what do you do as a parent, as a child who has to walk into that? And if you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable in my garage looking at pictures of it. I'm being made to participate in this guy's fantasy for no reason other than I want kids to have an education that is free of that. How dare I? Here's Maple Leaf Foods, and they say meet Jeannie Tamboli. I may have accidentally got that right. Director of Diversity and Inclusion, D&I, at Maple Leaf Foods. Bill Morneau. I think, is it Bill Morneau's wife who owns Maple Leaf? Anyway, in this leading women of Maple Leaf profile, she reflects on the pivotal moment that inspired her to join the team and walks through our diversity and inclusion blueprint. They're doing this by force, on purpose. It's not a mistake, and it's not going to help anybody. Look at what the school board's done with it. They don't want to listen to any criticism. Okay. Andrew says, what does a meat company need a director of diversity and inclusion for? Right? Exactly. I'm very interested. Here's Raquel Dancho. Moving on from the gender stuff. I think that it needs to be dealt with, but I don't see anybody realistically dealing with it. They've made a lot of moves to get this enshrined in law, and it doesn't look like they're going to stop anytime soon. Raquel Dancho says, read my statement on the government's silence on the whereabouts of an ISIS child trafficker. And she says, according to the Globe and Mail report, Mohammed al-Rashid, a Syrian human smuggler for ISIS, Islamic State, recruited to spy for the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, was recently freed from prison and promised asylum and relocation to Canada. The Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendicino, is refusing to confirm whether the former ISIS child trafficker was granted asylum or any details regarding his whereabouts. Mr. al-Rashid was convicted of smuggling 3 school-aged girls as young as 15 years old to ISIS terrorists, this after being recruited by CSIS. Canadians deserve to know that they and their children can walk the streets safely without being confronted with such a dangerous criminal. Canadians were promised a feminist government, a transparent government. What they are getting is the exact opposite. They have a government that would put the safety of young women in peril and will go to enormous lengths to hide that fact. We're calling on Marco Mendicino to tell Canadians the truth. Ha! I'm sorry, Raquel, but Marco Mendicino's a liar. Even if he told you that he was telling you the truth, you'd have to believe that he was lying. He shouldn't be in the House of Commons. He should resign in disgrace because he's a lying liar who can't tell the truth. So asking him for the truth in an official letter is like, really, really tell us the truth this time, Marco, even though you've lied to us and we have no reason to believe you. I'm sorry. We're just not going to get the truth from Marco Mendicino. He should be booted from cabinet and probably booted from caucus and the whole deal. He's a liar who does not deserve anyone's trust, period. Sorry. You lie on the floor of the House of Commons? Get out of here. No, I don't think so. The truth, jeepers creepers, the truth according to Marco. Okay, I lost my space. Hold on. I lost my place. Let me find it again. All right, back to it. And if the Trudeau government puts a dangerous criminal on our streets, they must explain themselves to Canadians. Oh man, they did that a bunch, and they haven't explained themselves one time. In fact, they've just blamed Canadians and said, racist, racist, racist. Conservatives will continue to push for answers to hold this tired government to account. Most importantly, we will use all means at our disposal to make sure Canadians are safe from dangerous criminals. Anything less is unacceptable. Well, certainly what's happened in Canada is unacceptable. Certainly the soft on crime, soft on guns, hard on farmers and legal guns, but soft on smuggled illegal guns, which criminals use mostly, has been a disaster, an absolute disaster. There's shootings in Niagara Falls, there's shootings in Kitchener, there's shootings all over the place. And the Liberals do nothing. They do nothing but claim that alt-right terrorism is the biggest threat in Canada. the Liberal government themselves are enabling this violence. It's unbelievable. Franco says, a home equity tax is so unpopular that the only people who support the tax are the people who are paid to study it, which is not surprising. This is Canadian Taxpayer Federation. This is a little article that talks about home equity tax. Yay. Despite spending nearly $500,000 studying and promoting a home equity tax, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation's own study found 95% of social media comments are against a home equity tax, according to records obtained by the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. A home equity tax is so unpopular that the only people who support this tax are the people who are paid to study it, said Franco Tetrazino, federal director at the CTF. Canadians can't afford higher home taxes, and politicians say they don't want a home equity tax. So why is the CMHC wasting more time and money studying home equity taxes? When Canadians sell the house they own and live in, their primary residence, they're not taxed on the money they make on the sale. In 2020, a group called Generation Squeeze received $250,000 from CMHC to write a report on housing policy. The report, published on January 5th, 2022, calls for a home equity tax targeting the housing wealth windfalls gained by many homeowners while they sleep and watch TV. The CMHC also gave Generation Squeeze an additional $200,000 in 2022 to influence public opinion in favor of the home equity tax. The CMHC conducted an in-house study of the social media response to the home equity tax proposal from January 5th, 2022 to January 10th, 2022. According to the records obtained by the CTF, of the 3,093 comments collected, 95% were negative. The commenters believe the tax would be unfair to Canadians who worked hard to invest in their homes and hurt Canadians who rely on their home equity for retirement. Comments also raised concerns about the consequences of home equity tax. People doubt that the tax would help to curb real estate prices, and some worry that it would drive prices even higher, reads the CMHC's overview of the comments. So that's pretty wild, right? And home equity tax, I think that's a no for me, dog. I don't think so. The Canadian government taxes us enough. Way, way too much, in fact. Financial Post talks about how the Bank of Canada can't keep inflation at the target and can't really manage things due to quantitative easing. The Bank of Canada is losing money for the first time ever on raising rates. Central Bank anticipates losses for the next 3 years, depending on how the inflation fight goes. Quote, we expect the bank's net interest income to be negative when our third quarter results are published on November 29th, the central bank said in a statement that was initially provided to the Toronto Star. The bank's interest expense is growing because of increases in the interest rate that we pay on our deposits. So the increased interest are hurting Canadians because of the increased the rate that we have to pay. That's bad. And people said, what happens? What happens when the interest rates rise? How much more does that cost? And they said, our debt's not the most expensive. Remember? Thanks, Christia Freeland, you Rhodes Scholar reporter, you. Our debt isn't the most expensive yet. Soon. Back to the article. It's easy to forget that central banks are set up to operate like any other financial institution. The Bank of Canada has a board of directors that oversees management, Governor Mackelman and Senior Deputy Governor Carolyn Rogers. Is that John Tory Rogers fame? Like the Rogers family fame? Right, John Tory's de facto Rogers because he's on the Rogers Control Trust. That's why I'm saying, John Tory Rogers, because he owns Rogers, the mayor of Toronto. Just making sure you know. Okay, back to this. On behalf of its shareholders, the shareholders are taxpayers via the federal government. So right now, Justin Trudeau's the shareholder on our behalf. So, he doesn't think about financial matters, right? The budget balance itself, right? No problem. You don't have to engage with your investments or anything like that. It'll probably handle itself. Sure. Typically, the Bank of Canada's balance sheet makes money because the liabilities consist almost entirely of banknotes, which don't pay interest, while on the other side, the central bank earns interest on its assets. The Bank of Canada acts as the central bank must send its profit to the federal treasury at the end of each fiscal year. Recently, it's been about $1 billion a year, but the Bank of Canada Act predates quantitative easing, or QE, an anti-deflation tactic that involves creating deposits in the form of deposits for creditors at the central bank, and then using those newly created deposits to buy bonds and other financial assets. So they make money, and then that made money buys Canadian bonds. So it's like, it works for a little while. It's like paying one credit card with the other credit card. It's maxed out again. I just paid that. Get out the Visa. Darn MasterCard. The Bank of Canada deployed quantitative easing for the first time during the COVID crisis, flooding the financial system with the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars to help keep downward pressure on the interest rate and to increase the capacity of banks to lend money. So while they locked everyone down, they flooded the market with this money. And now that we're dealing with inflation, they're trying desperately to remove that money from the market, but Justin Trudeau keeps spending and doubled the GST check. Doesn't make any sense. Pretty crazy. Back to this. An unintended consequence of that policy is that for the first time in its 87-year history, the Bank of Canada is on track to lose money for an extended period as interest expenses on deposits climb in tandem with the benchmark interest rate, which Macklem has raised by 3 percentage points since March in an attempt to cool demand that has helped push annual inflation to about 8%, the highest level since the early 1980s. I still think we're going to go higher before things change. I do. I think we're going to go higher. I think that maybe we're flattening out a little bit and then we're going to see a spike, but who knows? Who knows? Pierre Poilievre weighs in. He says, farmers are the heart of communities across our country. Unfortunately, Trudeau's policies like the carbon tax and fertilizer mandates impact their livelihoods and drive up the cost of food for everyone, axe the carbon tax and support Canadian farmers. So Poilievre, as the leader of the opposition, is calling for axing carbon taxes and supporting Canadian farmers. So, hey, there you go. He's talking about that. However, yesterday, remember the dick pics for Tony Clement, right? Apparently, he helped, not Justin Trudeau, excuse me, Pierre Poilievre get into the Conservative leadership. And so I scratch your back, you scratch mine, right? Poilievre appoints ex-Harper cabinet minister Tony Clement to the board of Conservative fund sources. Clement had recently raised money for Pierre Poilievre during his successful leadership campaign, right? Man, so you make some phone calls, some robocalls, you get some votes out, you turn out the vote and I become leader and you become something else, right? You get an appointment. Ooh, what time? Where should I be? Andrew Lawton. Let's move into the convoy. So I was saying the shine is coming off. Yesterday, I saw a whole bunch of people talking about how Pierre Poilievre was making them angry because of Melissa Lantsman being prominently displayed in his government. And now this Tony Clement appointment is signaling that he's just like all the others. And I mean, Greg was right all along. Of course he was. But I mean, we had to go through it. We had to look at the hope. We had to look at the excitement. Do you think that campaign is going to carry Mr. Poilievre? There are some people who are disenchanted, but I think that there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, we've got to stop Trudeau. And they're not going to see that it's all the same. But you can tell them, you can lead a horse to water, but can't make him drink. Andrew Lawton says, let's move into the convoy. CBC is reporting using hacked illegal information to report that convoy supporters donated to the Conservative Party of Canada. This is supposed to be a gotcha interview or a gotcha article. This is supposed to be bad. There's supposed to be bad people doing this. Oh, the convoy people are donating to the Conservative Party. Andrew Lawton points out this means that the convoy engaged people in the political process who've been disinterested or excluded in the past. Sounds like a good thing to me. And then he continues to point out, this CBC article references donors to the Give, Send, Go crowdfunding campaign for the convoy protest, but doesn't mention that this story is based on the use of illegally hacked and published data. Not even a footnote, CBC? Yeah. CBC needs to be defunded, really defunded. Convoy donors gave more than $460,000 to the CPC leadership race, and many were first-time federal donors. Those evil, evil convoy people. How dare they, checks notes, donate to a political party? Oh, Canada. Canadians who donated to the Ottawa convoy protest contributed more than $460,000 to Conservative leadership candidates, and many of them were donating to a federal political party for the first time, an analysis by CBC News shows. A comparison of donations to Conservative leadership contenders up to August 1st with the Give, Send, Go crowdfunding campaign for the convoy protest found over 3,100 people who contributed to both campaigns based on identical combinations of names and postcodes. The lion's share of convoy donor leadership campaign donations went to Pierre Poilievre. Yeah, he won by a lot. But it's super interesting to me that the CBC is using these hacked databases to compare and create stories out of. If this was a hacked Trudeau email cache and the right wing was using it, they'd say that's illegal. You can't use that information because it was hacked. The hacked information that the evil right wing are using. And then all of a sudden, it becomes about the hacked information that the right wing are using. It doesn't even matter what the email cache says. They talk just about how evil it is to use this hacked information. That's how they spin it. I mean, you don't even need the other side. You don't even need that to happen to see that's exactly what they would do. And it's unbelievable. It's egregious. They don't deal with actually solving problems. And that's a huge problem. It's a massive problem. Here's the viral meme. And I'll show you some examples. Here's Jeff Buxley. I think that's how you say that. Sorry if I got that wrong, Jeff. Jeff with a G. Jeffrey with a G. Who's the boss? Never mind. I served Canada. He was Angela's like boyfriend for a little while, Jeffrey with a G. And then, of course, Angela and Tony get together. Jonathan was the glue that held that whole show together. Without Jonathan, no need for Tony. Okay, back to this. Jeff with the G says, I served Canada for 37 years. I'm a Canadian, armed forces veteran, and a retired RCMP member. I guarded nuclear weapons and prime ministers. I'm Canadian, but Justin Trudeau calls me an extremist with unacceptable views. Everybody has been doing this. Here's Danielle Smith. I'm an educated and independent woman running to be Premier of Alberta, but because I believe no Canadian should be discriminated against for refusing a COVID vaccine, according to Justin Trudeau, I'm a misogynist with unacceptable views that must be dealt with. Hashtag Trudeau must go. And she's got a second one here. She says, perhaps he'll have to deal with me sooner than he thinks. And hashtag Trudeau must go. So Gerald Butts weighs in and he says, the real question is who's paying for this campaign? Right? This is no longer the meat and potatoes of 40,000 accounts. And there are 40,000 accounts and more every day. Like my Twitter feed is useless because of how many people are doing this. And I'm not sad. I'm blown away. I can't believe how many people are doing this. Rowan says, triggered, Gerald Butts locks down replies in response to Canadians' mass mockery in response to Trudeau's bigotry. Good job, Canada. We're getting to them. And Dean Blundell was spinning the same. I hate talking about Dean Blundell because he's such a waste of time. But he was talking about how the same line that Gerald Butts is pushing, somebody's paid for this. This is an American bot farm. Bot farms are from Macedonia, Dean. Come on, man. Catch up. Major back pain says, liberals are asking who's paying for the Trudeau has to go hashtag tweets. Tells you all you need to know about how they use social media. Yeah, it says more about them, doesn't it? It says more about them than us. Lori says, Ryan says, interesting side note. Now, when you type the hashtag Trudeau must go, it does not come up organically. Twitter must have been told to make some changes. It now attempts to autocomplete to Trudeau must go on and Trudeau must stay. So that's pretty wild. I've seen this before. I saw this in the 2019 election. I saw Twitter, as soon as the government identifies something and they say this is alt-right extremism, they say, oh, that Trudeau must go hashtags all bots, eh? All right, done. And they disrupt the hashtag and it stops trending. It doesn't matter. This thing was huge. It was a huge protest. I think here it is. Nicole says, for anyone getting angry over the Trudeau has got to go posts, just think there are over 40,000 posts. This is not a small amount. Consider this. Perhaps the amount of Canadians who actually are against Trudeau isn't a small fringe minority. Maybe listen to them and hear them out. It's the same thing as everything else. If you say something that's rational, well, I mean, the school board trustee person who had all those red flags, and all those red flags are a cornerstone to our democracy, right? Hearing people out, having individual responsibility, diversity of opinion, that's a red flag. All voices are needed. That's a red flag. Give parents and students and staff their voices back. These things are red flags. These things are the cornerstone of our democracy. Parents are the primary caregivers and primary influencers of their children, not the school, not the school board, not the board trustees, the parents. And these people who don't want to deal in those realities, they want you to hand over your kids. And trust me, everything will be just fine. And you never get to ask us any questions about anything ever. No, that's not how this all works. It's wild. I'm still not used to it. Sorry. The Canadian Independent says, look, Canadian woman says her mom went into a Shoppers Drug Mart for her booster shot and 15 minutes later dropped dead. My beautiful mother was taken yesterday by the COVID booster shot. She was happy and perfectly healthy. She spent yesterday morning visiting me at my house up until her appointment time. She left for her appointment happy and energetic. She had no medical issues at all. My mom texted me right after she got the shot to let me know she was waiting the 15 minutes, and I texted her back. It was right after then that they say, quote, she dropped dead before she hit the floor in Shoppers Drug Mart. This is what the doctors have told us. This never should have happened, and they have known what they were shooting. This never should have happened had they known what they were shooting into us. My mom would still be here. So I don't know, but there's a lot of these kind of stories. 2 years ago, or a year ago, when people were raising the alarm about vaccines and mask mandates were in full swing, I still can't believe we went through that. Can you believe that we went through that? I still sometimes look at other people and say, I can't believe the unacknowledged trauma that has happened across our country, and nobody's really done anything to address it. They say, oh, we're going to address it, we're going to talk about it. But addressing it is accountability. Addressing it is looking at the fact that the vaccines don't do a darn thing. Addressing it is taking away the ArriveCan app and taking away all the COVID measures, bar none, and saying we'll never do this again because we screwed it up so terribly awfully. Closing schools was a disaster. Closing businesses was a disaster. Spending money the way we spent money was a disaster. Everything that we did was a disaster, and there's been no accountability. No, even ministers being removed from their responsibilities. Dr. Tam is still prominent and putting out ridiculous statements of changing language around gender, which again is just meant to further enshrine their power. Culty language and taking control of language seems to be important within a cultural change like we're undergoing, and that's what they're doing. And how do you heal? How do you acknowledge what's happened? How do you move forward when it's still ongoing and people don't even recognize it or think we don't want to deal with it anymore, it's over and we're going to move on? It's not over. It's not over. People are going to get sick, and the healthcare is overwhelmed in its August, September. We haven't even started flu season yet, or maybe we have, but it's just the beginning. They're going to use numbers to scare people. They're going to try and get consent for this stuff. It is because we haven't dealt with this. They can do it all again. All of the foundation of this, the fundamentals are all in place, and they could just turn it back on. So, and if you have a court challenge, it's going to take a year. Good luck. A year if you're lucky. If you're lucky, it's unbelievable. So, I mean, it's one of those things. I don't know where this goes, but it doesn't seem like we're close to a resolution. Like, you know, when you're watching a game and it seems like a chess game or something like that, and you see like, oh yeah, you're close to the end. I don't even know where we've hit the mid game yet, and that's scary. Viva Fry says, before anyone changes their avatar in solidarity, don't worry, Martha's Vineyard remains 87% white. Martha's Vineyard migrants leave the island as outrage at DeSantis grows. How dare DeSantis do to them what they said they wanted through voting for a sanctuary city? Yeah, I've rethought the whole sanctuary city thing. I still don't like using people as pawns, but they said that they wanted that. The Democrats and the people who live there, they all said that they wanted that. So that's pretty wild. The queue is the thing. The last tab for today is talking about the British queue. Here's David Beckham talking about the death of the Queen, and I bet Pringles effing well love this. They sent him a package of Pringles bigger than he's ever, like, he's going to get home, and the Pringles, they're going to have couches with Pringles. They're going to have an entire room of different Pringles chips ever. Lifetime supply of Pringles for David Beckham. Here we go. David Beckham in the queue.
We all want to experience something where we celebrate the amazing life of our Queen, and I think, you know, something like this today is meant to be shared together. So, you know, the fact that we've been here, we're eating Pringles, we're eating sherbet lemons, you know, we're eating sandwiches, having coffee, so donuts as well.
And I bet, Madam, you didn't think that you'd be in the queue with David Beckham, did you?
No, I didn't, but big respect to him. He's stood with us, and yes, he's paid his respects how he wants to. Yeah. And I think that's amazing, and it's just been really good.
And how long have you been in the queue, David?
I think we all got here, 12 hours.
Right, okay. And how's it been on the knees? Because we've seen you sort
knees
of like...
are okay, it's the back.
Oh, right,
and the feet.
So, we're joined now by David Beckham.
He's getting pulled over by another... Right here, he's getting pulled over by another British television studio to talk about standing in the queue. 12 hours standing in the queue, David Beckham. I think that's pretty funny. I didn't see Posh Spice. I would imagine she's home with the kids or whatever. But what a wild thing to have happen. And like, to pay your respects to the Queen by going and standing in the longest British queue ever. My goodness. I mean, definitely not on my 2022 bingo card, but here we are, the British queue and the death of the Queen. Life couldn't get any more mad, could it? Jeepers creepers. I think that's a good place to finish. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out Speaking Moistly and all the other stuff I do on there. Enjoy your weekend because, hey, man, it's a weekend, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.